achieve impact, and public academia as a pathway to impact, and it's treated as a de facto good thing. And if you bring any criticality to that discussion, you're treated like an irrelevant dinosaur trying to cling to your ivory tower privilege, who actively hates positive social change. And I think there's some anti-intellectualism at work there, which we will connect to rising populism later in our talk. But first, we're here to tell a cautionary tale that brings some much needed criticality and nuance and data to these conversations about, as Ellen introduced, what we need to be thinking about and the duty of care involved if we're going to be sent out to be sharing our work publicly. But it's also a tale, I think, that makes the point of why it's important that we're not discouraged and we are not scared away from taking up space in public debate.
So I'm going to tell you our kind of story of how we got here, essentially. So in December 2018, we received a really random email. I think it was a Sunday morning, was it, Hannah? Something really random, from the Sunday Times, informing us that they would be running a piece on our research which was published in Celebrity Studies. So the piece that was in Celebrity Studies is there at the top, that you can see, and then the pieces that were written about that are at the bottom. So the piece was about representations of Meghan Markle and the royal wedding. So our article argued that although through Meghan Markle, the monarchy co-opted the language of feminist politics to set themselves apart from these other forms of patriarchy and to mask or at least deflect attention from their own intensely problematic relationship with issues of race and gender and class and religion. And we argue that Meghan herself may be feminist, but the fact this was now being used as part of the modernisation of the British monarchy in the public imaginary was extremely problematic. So the body of that Sunday Times article represented our work reasonably well, but the title, which as you can see was "Academics Accuse Meghan Markle of Dropping Feminism Like a Hot Potato," was just completely inflammatory.
Obviously, hot potato being a academic term that we often use and that just flies through peer review without problems.
That was obviously a quote, not. So then when the Sunday Times published that, it was other outlets then picked up that, so the hot potato thing, rather than our actual work. So there was kind of a distortion going on in terms of they were kind of remediating something that had already been remediated. Hannah very bravely appeared on Sky News, but the tagline for the piece on Sky News included the Sunday Times hot potato remark in quote marks, as though we had said it. So it was as though it was quoting Hannah. And you can see other sensationalist headlines included "Academics Blast Royal Transformation" and "Meghan Markle Slammed by Academics for Dropping Feminism," neither of which we said. And that was kind of drawn upon this mundane paradigm of the female catfight to suggest that we were judging Markle as an individual, right? So it's kind of our piece that was hitting out against her, which it wasn't. So within 24 hours, that had gone viral globally, and it was reported all over the world. So we want to be clear: this is not going to be a talk about how to replicate that. And the nature of something like that is kind of you can't replicate it. I'm not sure we'd want to replicate it, actually. I'm not sure I would. But most kind of training about academic impact is geared towards trying to replicate what happened to us in terms of reach and perceived success. But we're here to talk about why we kind of shouldn't be encouraging people to want to replicate those experiences exactly, and also how we can support them within that. So after all this went viral and after all this happened, inevitably the kind of social media backlash began. And negative responses came in two categories. So it was either anti-Meghan people, and these people tended to kind of draw on racist, anti-feminist, pro-empire, pro-Brexit and pro-Trump. Remember, this was about 2018, so it's that kind of period. So they were drawing on that kind of rhetoric. And then the other camp of people were pro-Meghan people, which tended to be wider royal fans, and a smaller subsection who kind of thought about Meghan in terms of race and, you know, politicised black uplift and all of these kind of political ideas. And even now, sorry, Even now, it's been 3 years, we still get people coming back to us with stuff like this. So while our paper was about how Meghan Markle's feminism had been co-opted by the monarchy, our own feminist argument had in turn been co-opted as part of the increasingly negative media coverage of Meghan Markle as a public figure. And if you remember, this was a time, you know, we wrote this at the time of the royal wedding, and actually in the months that passed before it was published, the tide had completely turned, and actually media representations of Meghan Markle were extremely negative, as they continue to be, as we now know. So actually there's kind of an interesting, you know, point where our thing was released probably at the worst possible point when these things had started to turn. And there was implicit and explicit racism in the coverage, and racist and sexist abuse of Meghan Markle was proliferating on social media as well. So we kind of got, I guess our piece kind of got caught up within all of that.
So when Sky News tweeted a clip of my interview with their presenter, again with the dropped feminism like a hot potato in quote marks, despite us never having said that, I have to keep reiterating that. That's when things got really nasty. So responding tweets, beneath their tweet, responding to their tweet with the video clip of me, called us fucked up, called us lunatics, said we were crawling out of the sewer. A lot of the abuse was gendered, so I was called a silly little girl, or these bitches when people were referring to us. And we know from existing feminist work that these kinds of gender-based abuse, it's used to make women feel uncomfortable speaking out in public. And there was use, we were called nasty women, which again in that pro-Trump era has a particular, evokes a particular moment and a particular type of misogyny directed at women in the public. And mannerisms were released. That I was to live up to certain benchmarks of femininity were all there's one here about the way I signed off at the end, or is it I caught the end of the interview when the Sky presenter thanked her, she replied with a sickly sweet, shoulder shrugging, coy smile, I'm sorry for the way I perform femininity and its repulsiveness. And you hear there's lots of things about my voice here. You can't stand 5 minutes of her irritating voice, and about how I sounded like a dickhead and things like that. So through all of these comments, there's a circulation of well-worn anti-feminist tropes, familiar sexist characterizations and vocabulary offering like an immediate shorthand for harassing and dismissing publicly speaking women. And it shows the enduring culture of ready stock responses being drawn upon to derail feminist discussion. And this included telling us directly to shut up and go away as an attempt to silence us.
What was also really interesting was this kind of use of pro-Trump, pro-Brexit, pro-empire sentiment, and how that was intertwined with an anti-feminist, anti-intellectual attitude, which was in the abuse levelled. And that was levelled against both us and against Meghan Markle, actually. And for some of them, we couldn't tell, actually, if they were trying to insult us or they were trying to insult Meghan Markle. So there's something really interesting there in terms of gender. A large proportion of the abuse we received hinged on a privileging of a particular kind of knowledge production over others. So, for example, derogatory comments were levelled at kind of knowledges that was deemed feminized and therefore inferior. So that comment, why does Sky constantly give a voice to people like this? Seems it's an organisation obsessed with female issues, Brexit, female issues, Brexit, female issues, Brexit, etc. You might want to report on some actual unbiased news for once. How about some that include men? As though news never includes men, if you didn't know that, just news for you. Another one, the conflation of unbiased news and news that includes men illustrates the stereotypical dismissal of female-centred stories as being based on emotion rather than evidence. So as well as a disavowal of women's knowledge in comparison to the apparently more kind of valuable male knowledge and the ways in which that might be constructed. And that was also linked to disciplines. So anyone in media studies or linked disciplines will not be surprised that kind of assumption that popular culture is irrelevant and isn't worthy of funding and is unscholarly and all of these things. So you can see comments there that say, you know, celebrity studies, this is the new low, who cares? And running throughout all of this hostility towards us academics is a strain of anti-intellectualism that Chief Brexiteer Michael Gove, and this was at the time, remember, so again, we're talking like the end of 2018. So Michael Gove had recently said, you know, Britain has had enough of experts when challenged by an interviewer for importing Trump's post-truth politics in his misleading campaign to leave the EU. So William Davis writes in a really important book that anti-intellectualism and Brexit are related, as both the European Union and experts are viewed with suspicion in the popular press. And indeed, some comments even drew on kind of Trump-esque post-truth language to describe us and Meghan Markle as fake news. So you can see there are multiple comments that said, we're fake news, Meghan's fake news, and so on. So we found ourselves trapped in this really weird place where a misrepresentation of our work was co-opted to further an agenda, an anti-Meghan Markle, anti-feminist agenda that we were explicitly disagreeing with. And we termed this, we wrote a paper about this afterwards, and we thought, well, if you're going to get this, you may as well get something out of it. So we wrote a paper about this afterwards, and we termed it the distortions of research remediation. So how, you know, the very institutions we critiqued for their misrepresentation of Meghan Markle and her feminism were doing exactly the same to us in order to further their newly developed anti-Markle agenda. So we kind of used in that paper, we did like a virtual, we called it a virtual autoethnography. So we looked at below the line comments on national news websites and tweets and kind of tried to quantify them and put them together in themes, as you've just seen with that kind of Brexit fake news thread that we found within that.
So this experience, the whole onslaught of media attention and the subsequent abuse we received left us with serious concerns about doing more impact work while female, and also of other intersecting identity markers such as race and sexuality and disability, which might impact upon access certain individuals have to having a public voice, knowing what we know about the way racism, sexism, queerphobia, transphobia, ableism all flourish online. So as Laura says, the first thing we did was use all the abuse that we received as data and reflect on our experiences. But we have also, obviously that's just our experiences, and we cannot speak to all of those ways in which the risks of visibility affect those who are already disadvantaged in this environment of digital hate. So we have expanded from there, and we've developed a new project called Cultures of Digital Hate, which has been funded by the Sociological Review and the ISRF, the Independent Social Research Foundation. And we're hosting events and creating resources in collaboration with those working in digital industries and policy. And we're working with researchers working in industry, government, academia, and charities. And we are looking at these questions and widening out from our experience to look at more generally academics who are dealing with issues of digital hate. And of course, it's a pervasive social problem beyond our experience. But one thing that we think is particularly pertinent to consider is that as academics, we are actively kind of made public and sent out to do these things. So we are a labour force who are effectively put in harm's way without any discussion of that harm and how it will affect certain people more than others. So now, as part of the project, we are calling upon employers who benefit from their employees' public profiles to consider their duty of care towards those employees that they encourage into the public eye. And we mobilise our collective experiences, knowledge and expertise to try to inform public policy and industry agendas. And we're trying to, our goal for the project is to help foster the conditions in which varied voices can participate safely in public debate. So we've conducted a survey and we'll share some very early findings so we've circulated a survey just to find the experiences of more academics beyond ourselves. And we are going to be undertaking interviews soon with people who have experienced digital hate. So you can get in touch with us. The survey is now closed, but we're still compiling our list of interviewees. So if you have experiences that you would like to discuss, you can get in touch with us and let us know. Likewise, if you're interested in collaborating in any other ways. And we've set up a website, and on there you'll find the article that we've been talking about, the video of our first event, which we hosted with the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, which is the kind of policy lobbying organisation. The Bot Sentinel, who use artificial intelligence to identify bots and hate accounts. So they were just posting today about how President Bolsonaro yesterday had 20,000 new followers on all of those accounts. They analyze and see that all of those accounts were created yesterday. So they kind of use AI to do these kinds of analyses that are really useful. And we also had a legal scholar, Cara Bakalis. So we'll be having the video of that event where we've just brought those different expertise together to think about how we tackle this problem or how we deal with it. That video's up, and we've got several more events this year, and you can sign up to those on our website.
So I won't spend too long on this because I'm sure we're all far too aware about RAF. I think it's important to give this a bit of background. So while UK universities are increasing pressure on scholars to disseminate their work in international media outlets and host public profiles on social media, very little attention is being paid by these institutions to the potential risks of being a public academic, particularly when undertaking any kind of feminist work or connected kind of issues. So as part of this neoliberalisation of UK universities over the past few years, we've seen the development of REF, so the Research Excellence Framework. And this process essentially rates academic publications via a 4-star system of value. And of course, every 4 years, there's kind of a circulation of that. And often that might be attached to funding, so it becomes very competitive. Thinking about what publications might be best to put in. And in 2014, they introduced impact into that. So impact is defined by the government as an effect on change or benefit to the economy, society, culture, public policy or services, health, the environment or quality of life beyond academia. And as Heather Serini notes, we've quoted that at the bottom there, this contains positivistic measures, positivistic assumptions, the impact is only that which can be quantifiably measured. So it imposes value judgments on what kind of knowledge is deemed relevant, both within and beyond the academy, and kind of encourages those conversations beyond the academy.
So yeah, we're indebted to Heather's work. I understand that she is a former colleague of yours. And she reflected on the need for a politics of ethics, which acknowledges the intersectional nature of engaging in impact work, and in particular, the ways in which policy agenda disproportionately impact negatively on a diversity of women. So taking that as our starting point, we feel like these concerns are increasingly important in the current socio-political climate. So we've seen the rising populism and racism following Brexit, throughout the era of Trump when we were starting this work, and in rising far-right movements, and the increasing racist and anti-feminist and anti-trans policies, all kinds of new misogynies and anti-intellectual ideologies and pro-empire rhetoric gaining traction globally. And I think this is a really important backdrop, because those are the digital cultures into which we are sending people. And following his own experience of provoking the ire of online fans of a populist far-right political figure, the academic Theodore Kalouris argued that online misogyny must be seen as the articulation of an increasingly powerful far-right populism, buoyed by re-energized forms of post-crisis neoliberalism, if we are to understand the vehemence of its discourse. So we therefore question the moral responsibility that institutions benefiting from public intellectuals have for the well-being of employees in the public eye, in a socio-political context where the costs are ever higher. And I suppose it's important to say there that those costs are not equally distributed. The risks of visibility and the rewards of visibility are not equally distributed. So
yeah. So I'd like to carry on. So we're going to talk you through, this is some very, very initial findings from our survey. So we literally got the coded data on Monday, so it couldn't be any more initial, but it gives us some really interesting ones and really quite, not necessarily surprising, we weren't necessarily surprised, but quite shocking things actually that really kind of show this.
I suppose the important thing is that we started by saying these are our experiences, and now we have the data to say that these are the experiences of all academics, or especially marginalised academics. Sorry, go ahead, Laura.
No, exactly. And I think we'd kind of had, following kind of our experience, we both had very informal conversations with lots of people, and lots of people said to us, oh yeah, I've had that, and that's kind of what prompted this. So, and that was really showed through in the survey data as well. There were some really quite incredible figures actually. So we've got 85 respondents across loads of academic disciplines, from sciences to humanities and so on. Academics did tell us that public academia is often required by their institution and their funders. So it's often, you'll notice, you have to obviously build it into funding applications often now. Universities have press offices, and they'll kind of often get in touch and prompt you to do these different things. And people told us that they feel their careers might be damaged if they kind of say no to those things, and if they don't participate in those things, regardless of kind of any reluctance they may have to do that and reasons they might not have to do that. And we will reiterate here as well that we did also get benefits. There was, people listed lots of benefits of doing this, and we're certainly not saying don't do it. We're just kind of drawing attention to the nuances of that and how it's not equally distributed. So there was benefits for people who were able to participate in terms of exposure. So kind of getting their research out there, getting readers, which is obviously, it's really important for us to want to kind of show research to those outside of just academia, right? That's kind of something that we, refer is really important. Networking, meeting new people, new contacts, and also career progression. So people said, it's really good for promotions applications, for example, kind of putting these different things in. I think, Hannah, do you want to say this next bit?
Yes, so those benefits are, we had survey responses that talked about it as a wholly good thing, and we tracked for whom is it a wholly good thing, and it's far more likely to see it as just a good thing if you are a straight white cis man, and that's there in the data. Those benefits are accessible to straight white cis men who are not being targeted in queerphobic white supremacist, transphobic, anti-feminist digital cultures. So lots of our respondents reported receiving abuse. So they will go out and share their work, they will conduct public academia, and they will receive abuse in response. And they received abuse based on who they were. They were targeted for their race, for their gender, and for their sexuality. And the cost of experiencing this abuse is really high. Some of the accounts that we've been given were very extreme, but in between, just having to go off sick because of the experience, the psychological cost and the cost to health and well-being. Got a hand up, Ellen. I defer to you whether we should pause for questions now or wait until the end.
Hiya. Is it all right if I can see it's Lorraine's hand? Lorraine, is it okay? Because we're recording this portion of the session. I'm just thinking about.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. It's a mistake hand. It's my laptop. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Lovely. Right. Okay, then we will keep going then, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions later. And I think maybe we will sort of discuss whether we stop the recording when people offer their other interventions as well, so they feel safe. Please do feel free to continue, Hannah, and thanks for that, Lorraine.
No worries. I'll hand over to Laura for the next slide, I think.
So the main finding was we asked them, do you feel your institution effectively prepares staff for the risks and challenges of public academia? And as you can see, 90% of people said no, which is pretty, I mean, it couldn't be much higher. And 1% of people said I got preparation from other sources. So that wasn't necessarily from within the institution, or they may not have had an institution as well. We had some people who were, not employed in institutions. And we asked them, well, where do you get this from? And they tended to reference kind of more informal forms of support. So friends, family, colleagues. A couple of people said kind of academic organisations and stuff like that, but not necessarily within the institution where they work. And there were some really quite powerful accounts, actually, we'll show those in a minute, of when people were kind of giving accounts of the institutional support they tried to ask for, or or they couldn't find, and it was pretty damning in terms of what the institutions are actually doing.
Okay, so actually I can't see the legend there, but the question was, has your institution offered staff training or support on doing media/public work, and if so, did this cover how to deal with backlash? And I think that there was one, it was 99% no, and one person said, I don't have an institution. So so let's also bring precarity into this conversation, because to all of those independent scholars having to do, we're talking about the institutional support that should be provided, but of course there's huge swathes of independent scholars who are having to do the same to keep up and be seen, and to get future jobs, but are doing so without any institution behind them at all. So institutional support is inadequate, but let's remember this person here who said, well, I don't have an institution at all. But from those responding who were within an institution, it was 100% no.
Yeah, sorry, that's my fault. I missed off the percentages.
Well, you can, yeah, it's team.
Forgotten how to do graphs. I did last do graphs in about sixth form or something. We don't do that anymore. So quotes. These were kind of quotes where we asked. We often left kind of open answers for people to put in different responses. And these were quotes from that, generally talking about really kind of harsh consequences of this. So, experiences they'd had and how that made them feel, and also about the lack of support that they felt they had. So you can see the first one. This was about the question about institutions and institutional support. And this person said, no, I think they're more concerned with the potential for reputational damage. They're shoving us out there to do impact, but don't want to deal with the consequences of it. And I think that echoes lots of respondents who kind of said, oh, when it's all good and we're getting loads of positive you know, positive coverage, and this was mine and Hannah's experience as well. When you're getting loads of positive coverage, the institution are all over it and are really into it. And as soon as it starts going wrong, they kind of, you know, wash their hands of you, and that's it. And they don't want to offer you any support. And that was really echoed in lots of these responses. Sorry, Hannah.
No worries. Yeah, and I think that there's no considering nuance in our experience. You know, doesn't matter who's criticizing you. They could be really unsavory characters bullying you, but the institution will go, oh no, here's criticism, that you know, we could get some mud splash on us, and back away, cut her off, she's on her own.
Yeah, and kind of telling you things like, we'll just ignore it and things like that. But if you're on the receiving end of that, then it's not so easy to do that. They can just kind of, you know, they can just ignore it, but it's not so easy for the person actually experiencing it. The second one says, as an autistic person with comorbid disabilities, including sensory processing disorder and PTSD, social media attacks have caused hospital visits and long-term sick leave. And the third one says something similar. So severe impact on my mental health, triggered PTSD, had to take time off work, also threats to colleagues and graduate students, cause them distress. So health and well-being was really kind of a massive part of this data, people talking about the effects this had had on them. And these are effects that kind of go beyond, you know, just reading comments on social media. These are effects that spread into people's lives more generally. So having to take time off work, you know, kind of feeling socially anxious, all of these different things that might be triggered by these experiences, that goes beyond just connected to the work, right? It kind of spreads into other areas of people's lives. And again, you know, if work is triggering this, then, you know, our argument is that then the work should be, the institution should be kind of partly accountable for this and for causing that as well. And the last one, this has left me feeling very bruised and vulnerable. I worry a lot more about publishing in the future. I have also put several projects on hold. My anxiety has worsened. So kind of personal experiences of that about anxiety, but also in the fact that it's kind of affecting their work life more generally, and that they might be kind of scared off writing about these different topics because they know it's going to get picked up in the future. And that was certainly my experience of this. It kind of put me off doing a lot of work. And my work is on the royal family, so it's kind of problematic that I was put off from that.
And yeah, I think the thing to say there is that again, we talk about how the risks are not evenly distributed. Those who are doing work that is troubling the status quo, that is progressive, that is giving a voice to groups that are persecuted or marginalized, are going to receive more of this backlash, more of this discouragement from participating in social debate. And so it's so important that those spaces are made safer for them.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so when we wrote the article, based on our own experiences, we made recommendations, and it's great to see that those have been reinforced through the wider research that we've done since. We've also asked for recommendations from the collaborators on our events, from industry and policy, and also in the survey. So we'll share those with you as well. But I just want to recap the recommendations that we made originally in our publication from our experience. And that was, so we were kind of ambushed by the idea that by our work going viral, we hadn't framed our work for the media. Had we written the press release ourselves, with the support of the university's press office, we would have had more control over the way it was framed. And this might have given us some power against these distortions of research remediation. Having said that, it was actually not the body of the article that did us harm. It was the headline, and that's always going to be written by the publication. And of course, they know that the academics call for nuance in consideration of race, and that's not going to sell lots of copies. That's not going to go viral around the world. That's not going to be remediated. So they know what they're doing when they set us up in a cat fight as some kind of, sour feminists in a kind of bitchy standoff with this glamorous woman. So there's only so far that writing your own press release can go, but we would have thought about it. We would have been forearmed. We would recommend it. And then our second recommendation is that universities, and probably this lies with the press office, they have a duty of care, not the media work, but also crucially afterwards. And I mean, Laura was saying that the advice that she got from her press office was simply don't engage. I mean, I didn't get I just didn't even get the time of day. So we are calling for press officers to take responsibility and consider their role in employee well-being, to consider this as an issue of harm in the workplace. And then what we've learned since is that if the research is misrepresented by one publication, now going back to that Sky interview, I would have made a correction a condition of further engagement. As it was, I couldn't actually see the graphics that was repeating the hot potato in quote marks while I was on there. And so now being a little bit more battle scarred, we would not leave that to chance. We would go in thinking, okay, this is actually about making a correction and making sure that any misrepresentation is dealt with. But then again, to qualify that in the same way as I have the other points, when they actually most of the harm came when they put a clip on Twitter, and that was never going to be the full interview. And which bit of the clip would they have clipped? Probably not the bit where we, again qualified with the nuance. So I bring these kind of tempering factors in with each of our recommendations, because we're very keen that it's not that we're saying just follow these things and you can have a unproblematic experience of public academia, because knowing what we know about how hate flourishes online and who it targets, we are not going to have a conversation that pretends that any of it is unproblematic. Now, we don't think that the responsibility lies on individuals to manage it. We think that that we want to devise training, not for individuals to cope with it, but for press officers to consider their role. But one thing I would say, if you do find yourself experiencing this, turn off on Twitter, you can change your notification settings so that you don't receive any notifications from tweets that from people that you don't know. And when we did that, it was amazing, because each of those notifications, especially once some of them have come with abuse, it's an adrenaline state. It's really very bad for you. It's cortisol up to the roof. Turning off those notifications really helped. And then say to your friends, don't come to my defense, because the only time I knew that someone was saying Hannah Yelin is a ugly bitch who sounds like a dickhead was when my friends came to type, Hannah Yelin is not an ugly bitch who sounds like a dickhead. Yeah, so they were defending me, but actually they were remediating the abuse and bringing it into my timeline, because I had the filters on, so I wouldn't see anything unless it was from my friends. So yeah, the old adage of do not feed the trolls, in our experience, is a really important one. It's worth saying that one of our speakers at the last event, that the founder of Bot Sentinel, felt it was more important to redress any inaccuracies, and they felt that it caused them more harm. It had a higher cost to know that stuff was out there and not redressed than to retreat from it and find calm. So obviously your mileage may vary, but in our experience, disengaging was absolutely crucial to recovering. Okay, over to Laura.
We also asked in our survey, we asked them to, what would you recommend? What would you want to see? And how could this be addressed? And obviously this is really, it's really important that we're not kind of saying this is an individual issue. There are things that we can do, like turning our settings off, but it's also much more than that. And digital hate is a much bigger problem than just this in this conversation we're having, actually. So it's a really complicated issue. So you can see lots of them have said training. That was really key. Better crisis comms, emergency training support. A couple of people said, well, anything would be really good. Being prepared to stand with the academics facing abuse, actively putting security in events, actually listening when we say we're receiving abuse. Some people said having a single point of contact would be really good. So, for example, in the VC office, so having someone to go to. So I think this is also a real problem. So we've kind of talked in this about the press office and things like that, but it's really hard to. So my press office are quite good, actually. I should probably say that because we've said a lot of negative things. They're actually not bad. There's things they could improve, but knowing who to go to is really difficult, I think. And having, when that happens to you, knowing your contact and knowing who you can trust and who you can trust to be good about that and who knows the processes, I think it would be really key. And that's something that lots of people said they felt they didn't have.
One of the logistical issues there is that digital hate is a 24-hour thing.
Yes.
It can happen anytime around the clock. So our article was published and the Sunday Times article about our work was published on a Sunday. I appeared on Sky News on a Sunday. By Monday morning, we had already been exposed to the most challenging parts of this. The institution is not awake yet.
Yeah, exactly. Some people say give training, but not that neoliberal nonsense. Training that understands that academics are human beings. Legal advice, and that's a really interesting one. And I think this is something that's kind of come up. And I've tried to get legal advice and was basically told, oh, there's no one available. And I said, well, who can I speak to? Oh, we don't know. Like there was literally nothing. They just wouldn't even engage with me. So I think, having, first of all, institutions being aware that this is something they need and they need to have and needs to be in place. And you can't just kind of say, well, it's your problem. Because, if you're doing work under their name and you're doing work, as part of your job and as part of funding and all of that, then it's their responsibility to kind of deal with that as well. You can't just say, oh, well, it's your problem now. But when you win a prize, oh, we'll splash that all over our university pages. And then this last one makes a really interesting point. So they could offer further support in terms of managing negativity, but I also think that's part of the extent to which online hate is being taken seriously. And there needs to be wider social change as well. And I think this is something we've kind of found as we've looked into this and we've started this new project and these new events. That actually this is really complicated. The ways in which you can kind of stop this are really complicated. Who's doing it? All those bots and all of those. It's a really complicated issue. And I think it's something that people think, oh, well, you can just ignore it and you can easily get past it. But of course, it's not always that easy if you're at the receiving end of that.
Especially as we've found, if it's a highly networked group that talk to each other, and then on anniversaries and things, it bubbles up again and again because they keep receipts. So yes, ignore it always and forever, whenever it may ambush you again.
Yeah, and there's more research as well on how those kind of networks work and how all of this goes together. There's kind of a lot more work that needs to be done on social media and how these kind of networks operate, which Bot Sentinel are doing really well.
So, yeah, to conclude, we don't want to suggest that public engagement work should be avoided altogether because, as we've pointed out, politically that leaves us bereft. Especially as it is a matter. It's it's an issue of accessibility. It is it's increasingly important in this context that there are expert voices and marginalized voices and feminist voices contributing to public debate. That's what the environment needs. But we need to be honest about the potential for backlash. It shouldn't be an invitation to withdraw, but a call to actively challenge the dominant voices and the structural inequalities and push for appropriate support for those who do enter the fray. So doing academic media work while female is a feminist issue, both in terms of its challenges and its potential.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, both of you. Really fascinating stuff. I'm going to try and turn the camera back on again. Is that going to work? Yes, it is. Hurrah. Rightio. So just to sort of check in with everybody then, I'm just thinking it's probably the best thing to do at this stage now to stop the recording so that people feel more comfortable to talk, if that's okay. So I'm just going to do that now and talk as I do that. But just one